Gripped by sudden terror, the girl is overwhelmed as a flood of past memories abruptly breaches her mind. Within this chaotic vision, she spots the Duke standing intimately beside an unrecognizable woman and questions her identity. The perspective shifts drastically, forcing her to look down upon her own lifeless body sprawled out on the floor. Trembling with tears streaming down her face, she realizes she is destined for a meaningless, throwaway death. Snapping back to reality, the scene transitions to a sunlit greenhouse where a voice calls out to Felicia. Sitting across from her at an elegant tea table, the Duke calls her name to get her attention. Leaning in with a concerned expression, he gently asks if she is feeling all right. Startled by the interruption, Felicia quickly apologizes and admits that she simply zoned out for a moment. Taking a calm sip of his tea, the Duke casually accepts her excuse with a quiet clink of his cup. Her mind continues to race as she tries to process the horrific vision she just experienced. Heart pounding in her chest, she realizes those visions of her impending death were actual memories rather than just a bad dream. The Duke presses the issue, asking once more if she is truly okay and forcing her attention back to him. Masking her inner turmoil, she quietly affirms that she is fine. Changing her mind seconds later, she looks down somberly and confesses that she actually feels quite unwell. Apologizing for wasting the time he set aside for their meeting, she formally excuses herself for the day. The Duke calmly bids her farewell as she turns her back and begins to walk away. Pausing mid-step, she casts a quiet, melancholic glance back at him before continuing on her way. Remembering their shared childhood, she reflects on how she has deeply loved her arranged fiancé since they were little kids. She fondly recalls that simply being allowed to stay by his side and watch him was always enough to make her happy. Staring out the window of her carriage, she realizes she has never cut a date with him short before today. The profound weight of her sudden realization finally breaks her composure, bringing painful tears to her eyes. As her carriage clatters to a halt at her estate, she tearfully admits how painfully one-sided her love truly is. Wiping her tears in the back of the carriage, she breaks down over the fact that he completely failed to notice her distress. She grieves the painful truth that he did not even realize something inside her had fundamentally changed. The scene establishes her imposing home at the grand estate of the Marquis Albright family. Pacing furiously in her luxurious room, she holds her aching head and tries desperately to sort through the chaotic revelations. Putting the pieces together, she concludes she has been reincarnated into a romantic novel centered around a duke's son and a noble lady. She remembers the story dictates that the hero's childhood friend and fiancé gets brutally murdered by a mysterious assailant. This tragic death is meant to serve merely as a convenient catalyst for the grieving hero to swear a path of revenge. Ultimately, the hero's quest for the culprit leads him to grow closer to the story's true heroine until they happily end up together. She envisions the story's true heroine standing gently and intimately by the hero's side. Overwhelmed by the revelation, she realizes her only purpose is to die just to push their eventual love story forward. Tears streaming down her face, she bitterly curses the cruel joke of being nothing more than a doomed former fiancé. Trembling with despair, she questions the point of her life and what will happen to all her genuine feelings. Slumping weakly to the floor, she weeps over how incredibly hollow her predetermined existence truly is. Clenching her fists, a sudden spark of frustration ignites within her as she refuses to accept that kind of destiny. Slapping her own cheeks with both hands, she forcibly shakes off her despair to regain her composure. With fierce determination burning in her tearful eyes, she absolutely rejects the notion that she has to die. Wiping her face clean, she acknowledges that simply moping around won't do anything to change her fate. She deduces that she might be able to avoid her demise if she intentionally keeps her distance from the Duke. Standing tall, she firmly refuses to follow the script and vows never to die for absolutely nothing. The narrative shifts forward a full week, showcasing the grand exterior of the Royal Academy. Students are seen mingling and walking leisurely through the wide, sunlit corridors of the school. Sitting completely alone while munching on a sandwich, Felicia sighs heavily about how bored she is. Holding her lunch, she reflects on how unhealthy it was that her entire life used to revolve exclusively around the Duke. Pulling out a chair in an empty room, she decides she urgently needs to find new hobbies that she actually likes. She genuinely hopes that discovering new interests will help her think about her former fiancé a little less. Reaching out, she selects a heavy book to officially begin her new, independent life. Gripping the cover tightly, she mentally affirms her absolute commitment to moving on from him. Finding a quiet spot, she settles at a long desk to read her chosen book in total peace. Her quiet moment is interrupted when a girl approaches her table and cheerfully mentions she has read that book too. Looking up, Felicia recognizes Lady Jacqueline, who is famously known as one of the Crown Prince's primary fiancé candidates. Jacqueline glances around the empty room with a confused expression as Felicia watches her in quiet surprise. Leaning in with genuine concern, Jacqueline asks if something happened with the Duke since Felicia has been eating alone lately. Felicia calmly deflects the worry by explaining that she and the Duke never actually ate together at school to begin with. Jacqueline is utterly shocked to learn that Felicia used to hand-deliver the Duke's lunch and then eat by herself in the cafeteria. Furious on Felicia's behalf, Jacqueline declares it unbelievable that he treated her that way and says she couldn't stand it. Touched by the other girl's sudden defensive outburst, Felicia simply offers a serene and accepting smile. Defending him slightly, Felicia explains she did it because she wanted to and worries she might have just been a bother to him. Jacqueline fiercely rejects that self-deprecating thought and angrily threatens to knock the Duke out if he ever viewed Felicia as a bother. Felicia gazes softly, touched that the other girl is a genuinely good person who is getting angry on her behalf. She offers a heartfelt thanks to her newly defensive friend. Rationalizing that the Duke is perfectly fine without her constant attention, she decides to finally start doing what she wants for a change. Watching his back as he walks away, she accepts that while the distance is a bit lonely, she will be alright. Explaining her new reading habit to Jacqueline, Felicia admits that her entire life used to revolve solely around the Duke. Jacqueline enthusiastically invites a surprised Felicia to try out her hobby, noting that Felicia seems lost on where to begin her new independent life. Felicia stares with wide, curious eyes and asks what exactly Jacqueline's hobby entails. Jacqueline smiles proudly and strikes a confident pose as she prepares to reveal her secret interest. Leaning in close, Jacqueline asks if Felicia can keep a secret, since she doesn't usually share this with anyone else. The energetic dark-haired girl proudly presents a rustic building, revealing it to be a jewelry workshop. Felicia gazes in awe, completely captivated by the sight before her. As they step inside, they are greeted by skilled craftsmen, and Felicia learns that Jacqueline's secret passion is making accessories. Admiring how Jacqueline glows with happiness over her successful soldering, Felicia understands why the high noble keeps her fulfilling hobby a secret. A blonde classmate named Kenneth Henwood, who is the son of a count, suddenly notices Felicia in the workshop. Kenneth drops down to eagerly examine Jacqueline's finished work, praising her excellent soldering and pushing himself to improve his own craft. Jacqueline's sweat drops awkwardly at Kenneth's intense, sparkly-eyed enthusiasm over her jewelry. Kenneth chuckles nervously and apologizes to Felicia for getting completely carried away by the impressive craftsmanship. Felicia giggles warmly at the playful banter between her new friends as Jacqueline relentlessly teases Kenneth. Drawn in by their welcoming dynamic, Felicia finds herself regularly attending the workshop alongside them. The time spent crafting in the sunlit workshop begins to feel incredibly fulfilling to her. Even when she makes mistakes and gets discouraged, she still finds the process of creating things highly enjoyable. Kenneth and Jacqueline dramatically pump their fists in a fiery, competitive spirit to cheer her on. Beaming with genuine happiness, she thanks them, incredibly grateful to finally have friends she can truly relax around. Because they share the same class, the trio naturally begins spending a lot more time together, with Kenneth casually returning a dropped item to her. She graciously accepts the item and thanks Kenneth for his attentiveness. Walking side by side through the grand halls, Kenneth casually asks her what she plans on crafting at the workshop this week. Finding her own passion and friends, she realizes she has finally taken a massive step toward living for herself. Unbeknownst to the happily chatting pair, the dark-haired Duke watches them intently from the shadows of the corridor. Returning to the grand estate of the Marquis Albright family, Felicia cheerfully announces her arrival home. Proudly wearing her newly crafted necklace, she vows to return to the workshop with Jacqueline, completely thrilled with her own handiwork. Startled by a sudden discovery, Felicia gasps and turns around to find a letter resting on her desk. Holding the envelope bearing her name, she whispers the Duke's name with a mixture of longing and sorrow. Memories of the agonizingly long past month swirl heavily in her mind. She reflects on how she deliberately stopped reaching out or visiting him while spending time with her new friends. Yet, simply recalling the sight of his retreating back proves how much he still captivates her. Her eyes still follow him instinctively, cementing the painful truth that she cannot stop loving him. She desperately wonders if he has spent even a fraction of this past month thinking about her. Despite wanting to surrender to the inevitable, a foolish part of her heart still clings to hope. Knowing he is incredibly busy and likely only fulfilling his fiancé duties, she is still deeply touched that he hasn't forgotten her. Reading his warm letter about the blooming flowers and their upcoming tea party at Cielo Café brings a bittersweet ache to her chest. Clutching the delicate parchment close, she realizes with overwhelming emotion that he remembered their tradition. Consumed by her stubborn feelings, she collapses into her chair and buries her face in her hands. She finally acknowledges that she cannot keep running away from her own heart forever. Steeling her resolve, she decides she must speak to him properly now before he inevitably meets the story's true heroine. Arriving at the elegant cafe, she silently vows to end this agonizing cycle of avoidance. Waiting anxiously as the maids note his absence, she lets out a heavy, nervous sigh. Gazing out at the beautiful conservatory, she reminisces about the very first time she realized she loved him at 6 years old. In her vibrant memory, the young Duke praised her rumored cuteness and confidently invited her to the rose garden. Little Felicia hesitated nervously, overwhelmed by the sudden attention from the boy. With a dazzling, princely aura, the young Duke reached out his hand and confessed he had been searching just for her. Blushing deeply, the young girl looked up at the handsome noble in sheer awe. As they retreated to the royal castle's gardens, a comfortable and serene atmosphere settled between them. The two children sat together quietly on a wrought iron bench surrounded by blooming roses. Breaking the peaceful silence, she timidly asked why he had gone out of his way to find her. He gently explained that her stiff smile made him worry she wasn't actually enjoying the party. Surprised by his observant kindness, her eyes widened as she earnestly thanked him. Looking away slightly, he softly told her she didn't have to force herself to do things she disliked. He firmly affirmed his belief in her absolute freedom to be true to herself. With a soft and incredibly sincere expression, he declared that seeing her smile was all it took to make him happy. Utterly captivated by his serious and heartfelt words, she felt herself falling completely in love. She recalls how their perfectly matched statuses and close mothers naturally led to an arranged engagement and their upbringing as childhood friends. Looking back fondly at the Duke, she remembers how her feelings for him continuously grew and filled her with absolute happiness. Gripping her dress in dread, she realizes that remaining his fiancé will only lead her straight toward her predetermined doom. Sitting alone in the sunlit parlor, she glances at the grandfather clock and notes with a heavy sigh that he has officially started standing her up. Clutching her hands tightly in her lap, she bitterly admits feeling foolish for even hoping he would show up since this is the first time he has completely ignored her. Just as she resolves to give him exactly 30 more minutes, a frantic attendant bursts into the hall begging for her pardon. Kneeling breathlessly before her, the young messenger apologizes profusely and explains that the Duke has been severely delayed by a sudden carriage accident. Leaning forward with wide, frantic eyes, she desperately asks if the Duke is hurt, only to be relieved when the messenger assures her that he is completely uninjured and simply helping the other party involved. The messenger hesitantly adds that the Duke will be further delayed because the woman he rescued is actually royalty from the neighboring kingdom of Kiboa. Her breath catches in her throat as a look of sheer, horrified realization shatters her calm demeanor. Hearing the name of that specific kingdom triggers a terrifying, undeniable wave of dread deep within her mind. Trembling slightly as she politely expresses relief for everyone's safety, she internally panics over the sinking feeling that her tragic fate is finally being set into motion. Mentally begging not to hear the terrible truth, she forces herself to ask the messenger for the foreign woman's exact name. The messenger respectfully reports that the rescued royal is named Lady Belinda Magloran. The confirmation summons a dark, foreboding vision of the Duke gently catching the fated woman in his arms. A chilling realization washes over her that Belinda McKellen is the story's true heroine and the sole reason her own throwaway death was written into existence. Looking out into the distance with a somber expression, she realizes that today is the fateful day the fated lovers finally crossed paths. Staring out the window while her maid speculates about the foreigner, Felicia silently notes that she never actually saw anyone named Belinda around the academy before. A painful memory flashes in her mind of the Duke smiling warmly and declaring that seeing her happy was always enough for him. Gazing blankly through the glass panes at a fluttering butterfly, she allows the heavy silence of the room to swallow her breaking heart. Tears prick the corners of her wide, melancholic eyes as the crushing weight of her unrequited devotion finally sinks in. Lowering her gaze in quiet resignation, she allows a single, silent tear to slip down her porcelain cheek. Closing her eyes to forcibly cut off her lingering sorrow, she formally announces that she will be taking her leave for the day. She tells the messenger to have the Duke focus on the foreign royal, ignoring the servant's frantic plea that the Duke specifically requested her to wait. Offering a polite but distant smile, she firmly asks the servant to relay her message of departure. Stepping out into the bright exterior of the estate, she lets out a long, exhausted sigh to release her pent-up anxiety. Walking briskly down the steps, she clutches her chest and internally scolds herself for being so drained by her own foolishly wavering emotions. Hardening her resolve as she marches forward, she decides that completely severing her engagement is the only logical way to survive. Suddenly, a familiar, commanding voice echoes across the grand exterior of the academy, calling out her name twice. Pausing her conversation in the academy lounge, Lady Jacqueline nervously points out that the Duke is standing nearby staring directly at Felicia. Gazing blankly ahead with a heavy heart, Felicia quietly remarks to herself that it has happened yet again. Recalling how she started noticing his constant gaze after their engagement, she realizes she has no choice but to end things now that he and the true heroine have finally met. She remembers that at first, she would just politely nod back because he never did anything in particular to engage her. The dark-haired Duke stares intensely forward with an unreadable, piercing expression. Despite her dismissive thoughts, she admits that constantly being watched by him like that still leaves a heavily complicated impression on her. Sitting comfortably with Jacqueline, Felicia brushes off the tension by stating that if the Duke ever actually needs something, he will simply come talk to her. Surprised by her uncharacteristically resolute tone, Jacqueline points out that it is highly unusual for Felicia to speak so firmly about her fiancé. Closing her eyes with a strained smile, Felicia insists there is no deep meaning behind his prolonged stares. She rationalizes her emotional distance by pointing out that he is incredibly busy handling diplomatic matters with a neighboring country. Suddenly, nearby murmurs and gossiping whispers from other noble ladies draw their attention toward the grand hallway. Both Felicia and Jacqueline turn their heads in confusion to see what has caused the sudden commotion among the aristocrats. A tense silence falls over the girls as they silently observe the unfolding scene from their seats. A delicate, gloved hand gently rests against the stone pillar of the balcony railing. The Duke walks closely alongside a beautiful, light-haired woman across the sunlit balcony. The two pause together in an intimate conversation, looking like a perfectly matched couple straight out of a fairy tale. Watching them interact so naturally, a heartbreakingly sorrowful yet resigned smile graces Felicia's face. She quietly accepts her tragic fate, acknowledging that the novel's true heroine is already standing right by his side where she belongs. A deeply concerned Jacqueline looks over and asks her friend if she is truly okay with watching them together. Maintaining her painful composure, Felicia forces a smile and replies that hosting the guests is simply his royal duty. She desperately rationalizes the situation by recalling that Duke has faithfully served as an aide to Crown Prince Christopher since they were young. She further explains to her friend that for this specific international exchange, the Duke has been officially tasked with hosting Prince Percival of Kitboa. The Duke elegantly escorts the beautiful foreign guest through the grand hall, drawing everyone's eyes. Felicia calmly identifies the stunning woman walking beside him as the foreign prince's sister, Lady Belinda McKellen. Overhearing the malicious gossip, she listens as other nobles whisper about how Belinda saved his life and how the two are now utterly inseparable. Despite knowing the logical reasons behind their sudden closeness, a lingering sense of despair heavily grips her heart. She sits quietly with her hands folded, fully aware that the surrounding nobles are pitying her and wondering if she is all right. Reflecting on the timeline, she realizes it has been exactly a month since she stopped visiting him, eerily coinciding with Belinda's arrival and his increased stares. As Jacqueline reaches out in pure worry, Felicia internally admits that there is no way this devastating situation wouldn't completely shatter her. Swallowing her immense pain, she stands up and urges Jacqueline to leave, falsely claiming that she is perfectly fine. Turning away from the balcony, she quietly confesses to a shocked Jacqueline that she has finally decided to give up on the Duke for good. Smiling with a painful determination, she turns and firmly declares her plan to eventually break off the engagement. Utterly shocked by this sudden decision, her friend violently shakes her and insists that the Duke has actually seemed genuinely concerned about her lately. Dismissing the concern, she rationalizes that his lingering gaze is likely just a reaction to her sudden disappearance from his daily life. Deep down, however, A hesitant part of her wonders if her assumptions about his true feelings might actually be slightly off the mark. Shaking off her doubts, she convinces herself that holding him back would be cruel now that she has finally resolved to let him go. Sensing her unwavering resolve, her friend softly concedes and promises not to stop her if this is truly what she wants. Gazing out the window, she solemnly reflects that the story's true plot has already begun and the Duke is destined to belong to another. Heartbroken by her own thoughts, she admits that staying by his side to watch him fall in love with someone else would simply be too painful. Remembering his flood of recent gifts and earnest requests for her attention, she acknowledges that his increasingly intense actions only complicate her resolve. Suddenly, the Duke appears in the grand hallway, rushing toward her and urgently calling out her name. Startled by his unexpected arrival, she pauses and politely acknowledges him with a formal greeting. Stopping before her with a serious expression, he confesses that he has been searching everywhere just to find her. Despite his attentive words, her defensive heart continues to grow colder as she forces herself to maintain emotional distance. Retreating to the safety of her room, she repeatedly whispers to herself that she must stay away and that everything will eventually be fine. Pushing him away entirely, she deliberately double-books the day of their planned date and has her servant deliver a last-minute cancellation letter. Seeking a distraction from her heartache, she ventures out into the lively, sunlit streets of the bustling town. A young child cheerfully thanks them, referring to her and her companion affectionately as Big Sister and Big Brother. Returning the warm sentiment, they politely thank the children and assure them that they also had a wonderful time. Waving goodbye to the smiling orphans who beg them to visit again, she feels fulfilled by finally executing her long-planned charity trip. Strolling through the vibrant marketplace with Kenneth, she takes in the bustling sights and sounds of the stalls. With a hint of disappointment in her eyes, she mentions to Kenneth that she really wishes Jacqueline could have joined them today. Acknowledging that Jacqueline is currently busy as the top candidate for the prince's fiancé, she hopes they can all browse the market stalls together once things settle down. A wave of nostalgia washes over her as she fondly remembers the time the three of them went stall hopping immediately after their workshop session. Recalling the vibrant energy of the marketplace, she notes how incredibly new and thrilling everything felt for sheltered noble girls like themselves. In her memory, Jacqueline excitedly points out a fascinating stall featuring exotic goods imported straight from the kingdom of Yanavamia. Snapped out of her deep daydream, she hears Kenneth gently calling her name to bring her back to the present moment. Turning her attention back to the merchant's display, she carefully inspects a beautiful trinket that catches her eye. She stares intently at the colorful array of trinkets, completely captivated by the beautiful craftsmanship on display. Her face lighting up with a radiant smile, she happily declares that she will purchase the delicate item she has been admiring. Holding her new treasure close, she feels a sudden spark of genuine joy and a renewed sense of clarity about her own future. Lady Jacqueline and a male companion agree with Felicia that making accessories for the children sounds like a wonderful and fun idea. Surprised by a sudden realization, Felicia and Jacqueline both stare blankly with wide, sparkling eyes. A brilliant idea strikes Felicia as she excitedly declares that she has figured out exactly what to do. Smiling warmly, she explains that she had always harbored a desire to donate her creations to the local orphanage. Chatting with the orphanage matron, Felicia reflects on how deeply rewarding the effort was since the children were so visibly happy. Offering a tender smile, she internally notes that seeing the children's joy completely lifted the heavy gloom the Duke had left in her heart. Later, her light-haired companion approaches and apologizes for the delay before presenting her with an item. Holding up the accessory, he proudly announces that he managed to fix it up beautifully for her. Gazing down at the jewelry with awe, Felicia softly breathes that the repaired section is actually sparkling. The young man explains that instead of simply fixing the crack, he seamlessly integrated gold into the repair so the damage wouldn't show. Reassuring him after his quick apology for altering it without asking, Felicia enthusiastically declares that she loves it because it looks even better now. Scratching his head with a bright smile, he expresses relief that she likes it, explaining he couldn't let her very first piece look damaged. Gripping the beautiful trinket tightly against her chest, Felicia earnestly tells him that the repaired accessory means even more to her now. Holding the piece up to her hair with a radiant smile, she notes that even if something breaks once, it can emerge shining even brighter than before. As they walk together through a grand stone archway, she giggles and thanks him while he compliments how well it suits her. Walking alone with a renewed sense of purpose, she vows to survive and pursue her passions just like the beautifully repaired hairpiece. Touching her chest gently, she realizes that the simple piece of jewelry has managed to give her genuine courage. The narrative transitions back to the grand, imposing exterior of the academy with a foreboding sense of unresolved tension. Suddenly, a loud and familiar voice cuts through the peaceful atmosphere by calling out her name. Startled, she turns to find the Duke standing before her, panting heavily as if he had been running desperately to find her. Staring at her with intense eyes, the Duke urgently asks if she has any plans because he desperately needs to spend some time with her.